Welcome to the Contagious Code podcast, where we dive deep into code, learn practical skills, celebrate the beauty of engineering, and eliminate imposter syndrome. I'm Tejas Kumar, and I've been building on the web for over 20 years at places like Vercel, Spotify, Zeta, and more. Today, my guest is Clark Sell, the founder and CEO of That Conference, a franchise, a series of conferences that are multidisciplinary and multi-track. That conference is, while it's not a tech product, it is indeed a tech offering. And I think it's important as part of founder and CEO season to include all aspects of the tech and web engineering industry. And organizing a large scale conference such as that is no exception. That conference typically sees over 1,000, maybe 2,000, because it's twice a year, or so attendees, and is just very large. There's a lot going on. It's more like a summer camp for geeks. They literally decorate the venue and put plants and trees and fake campfires and tents everywhere. And it's just a massive event. If you haven't been to one, we'd recommend it. In this episode today, we explore what it takes to organize such a large event that is multidisciplinary and multi-track, the challenges that it has. For example, you have to book out a venue years in advance, and then if there's a recession and people don't buy tickets or you don't get sponsors, you still need to pay the venue, and so you tend to be in the red, so to speak. And how do you navigate that as a conference organizer and the founder of a conference? So we explore the challenges. We also explore the joys of being an organizer and enabling an exchange of ideas that really change people's careers in a tremendous way. At the time of recording, I'm at Conf Budapest, the last of its kind, and this conference has impacted my career in such profound ways since I first spoke at it in 2019 that I can't even begin to tell you how valuable it is. So if you're interested in tech conferences, that is speaking, or attending, or sponsoring, or organizing, this episode is definitely for you. Now, I'd like to offer this to all of you at zero cost because this is separate from my day job, and the way I can do that is through sponsors. So let's take a moment and thank the sponsors of this episode, this podcast, and then we can get into it. The Contagious Code podcast is partnered with Code Crafters. They teach you how to code in a very similar way to me. What they do is they have you take things like Docker and Git and Redis and learn them, but also learn them by implementing them in a programming language that you know and enjoy, like TypeScript or Go, whatever you're comfortable with. And this is really cool because you learn how to code in those languages better, but you also learn the mechanisms by which systems like Git and Docker and Redis work under the hood. So you learn 2 for 1. And you can learn at your own pace, and it's self-guided. There's a free tier, there's a paid tier, and if you join through the Contagious Code podcast, you get a 40% discount. To avail this discount, go to tej.as/codecrafters. There are also links in the show notes. The Contagious Code podcast is partnered with Stately.ai. Stately is a product that makes visualizing the flow of logic across your application predictable and robust using state charts. It's a diagramming tool that then exports the diagrams to code and also includes some really great AI agentic workflow tools as well. If you'd like to check that out, go to stately.ai. Finally, the Contagious Code podcast is also partnered with That Conference. So yes, you're listening to the founder of That Conference today, and we've partnered with it. That Conference Wisconsin is coming up, and if you want to attend it, then share this episode on social media, say you want to attend it, and we'll give you a free ticket, or actually, being fully honest, you'll enter a raffle to win that free ticket, and you could be randomly chosen and go. So if you want to do that, share this episode on social media, and we appreciate the partnership with That Conference. Thanks for listening. Now for my discussion with Clark Sell. Clark Sell. It's an honor and a privilege. I've spoken at 2 That conferences, and now you get to come to my thing. What an honor.
The honor is mine.
It's so good to have you here. People may know you already from things like That Conference and your activity in the Svelte community, among other things. But for those who haven't, would you be willing to give us an introduction to yourself, your background, your inspiration, all of that?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll start with just thank you for having me here. It's a privilege to be able to call you a friend, and how our paths have crossed over the past couple of years. So, who am I? Clark Sell. Own 2 businesses, been in this industry 25 years. So started on the aforementioned year 2000 as a tester, and then kind of worked my way up through the ranks. Worked at Allstate for, 7, 8 years, then went to Microsoft and worked there almost 10, and then worked for a Bulgarian company, and now we have our own 2. So geek, 25 years, slinging web code. Father of two teenagers, 18, 16, husband. And yeah, I run a little conference. Like to get my hands dirty, like to build stuff.
A little conference? How many? I remember the numbers were like in the thousands, or it was 1,000 or something like this.
Yeah, at the height of our day, so 2019, we had about 1,800 folks.
Oh my God, that's 2,000, and you say a little conference. Undersell yourself, Clark Sell.
Yes, it's hard to fathom those kind of numbers. Where the pandemic's been an interesting thing. And so we haven't bounced back to those numbers yet, but I'm also not trying to create the biggest place known to, all of geekdom. I would much rather a place where you have, you've grown, you have lifelong friends. And if that's 500 people or 1,000 people, whatever that works out to be, such that it's a win and financially stable for all, is the right place. So I'm all for engagement.
Yeah. Fantastic. I think most people here would be interested in that, and pun intended, in that conference. Can we? I mean, look, I've watched your keynotes. Your keynotes are amazing. I've given one.
You have,
and
you introduced
and
mine.
Yeah, that's right.
Which was the oddest feeling ever, because I'm the one always doing that for somebody, and to be in the reverse was I had a hard time processing that. It was just weird.
I can imagine, and what an honor. I mean, the person who introduces every single keynote for years, I got to introduce yours. I do not take that lightly. That was incredible. So you have these keynotes, which are, I've never seen this at any conference, right? They're 1.5 hours long. And for me, actually, that was a precursor to the podcast. Most of our episodes now are around an hour and a half, 2 hours. And I was just like, oh, I did this for Clark. I didn't just do this on a podcast. But
it's not a lot of time.
Yeah, it really isn't. And you get some really excellent storytellers. That I was one of them, but I'm not like blowing my own horn. You have people like Tyler Desson, you have people like James Quick, Kent C. Dodds, Mark Texan. Like, these are just titans, right? We should maybe get them on. Kent was already on the podcast. Anyway, I wanted to take the opportunity to have you be a storyteller here and tell us about that conference. Sort of, where did you get the? You mentioned you started in 2000 as a tester. And you worked for Microsoft and a Bulgarian company. At what point in the timeline did you go like, I need to start a conference, and why?
Let's see. I started in tech in 1998. That was when I graduated for the World Uni or college.
Was that a computer science degree?
I didn't. The background on me is I grew up as a mechanic. I lived in the ghetto. I worked on cars, slung cell phones, neon lights, whatever I could do to make cash. And my parents forced me to go to college. Wasn't a bad decision. And I went there like, I look at my son and I'd say, I went there like any 18-year-old boy and go, I don't know what I want to do. Like, what is this like path? And I got sucked into something called an MIS degree. So half business, half kind of computer science. And the backstory there is my dad was always in engineering and in software. And I kind of hated that family life as he grew up because he was always in the books, in the office, doing his thing, and wasn't really like available, if you will. So I didn't want that. I didn't, you were very glued to computers from a young age up. We had accessibility to them, but I had a negative experience with it, so I didn't really want it. So when I graduated, I ended up at Allstate on this year 2000 project, and I ended up there because the salary was $1,000 more than the place that was up the road. And I got told I was going to do testing. I had some programming experience, and I told the vice president at the time that I interviewed for that I wasn't going to sit behind a computer and code all day because I thought that was the dumbest shit ever. And I was probably 2 months in, and the next thing I know, I'm slinging code to write test cases because my thing is any good engineer is lazy. And I was like, I'm not writing these things. Like, you want me to write all these test cases? Like, you got to be out of your mind. There's no way in hell I'm not doing this. And so
were you writing with Selenium or Gherkin or whatever it was back then?
None of that shit existed back then. No, like I'm writing, we're producing CSV files that would get shoved into, mainframe systems to test like the purchasing process of a line of business or a line of insurance, in insurance. And so, and it's like, oh, well, you need to have every permutation and this and that, and they've got to be aged appropriately so that when they roll off or renew, and the whole 9 yards. But I was like, I'm not doing this. Like this ain't happening. So, of course, I started writing code, and that led into the .com boom. And I was working on how Allstate sells insurance on the web. So we were trying to be one of the first carriers to play that role. And but that's kind of a long way to say, like, my foray into the community was like, I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah. And I started meeting people. Google was coming out. God, I sound like such an old hag. But like Google came, right? And we were like, holy shit, like this, look at the wealth of information. And back then that wealth was like nothing. There wasn't a ton. Like we, to pimp your book, like we bought these things and we went through them, and they were gospel. But there was only like a few of them. There wasn't what you have today, which, I mean, you want a React book, you can get 75 of them. Yeah. So I started getting involved and kind of understanding I've always been kind of a team person. And so, I just started getting involved in the community. And where I live, there isn't anything. Like, I live in the middle of the sticks. I don't live in Chicago. I don't live in Milwaukee. My town is like, I don't know, 4,000 people.
By sticks, do you mean like farmland, like
country?
Hay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, we live kind of, I would call it on the edge of rural America. Like, we're the last train stop. If I go 10 miles to the west of me, it's like, okay, you're not getting internet unless it's a satellite. Like, I'm at the end of the internet line. Like, it doesn't go any further. There's no loop back. Like, if the internet goes out, some farmer cut the damn thing, and like we're out for like 3 days.
Wow.
So my, I kind of went up through my career, and then as I was speaking, I spoke a lot at that time in different cities up and down the region and the U.S. And I was like, why do we not have anything like this where I live? And the like this was like, I wanted to learn about other technologies. I wanted to hear from other people. I wanted my kids to be involved. I wanted to meet your spouse. I wanted to have a little fun. But I live in between all of these major metros, and everybody's like, I'm Ruby. Yeah. I'm .NET. I'm Java. And I'm like, we just use computers to like make shit. Like, it doesn't really matter what you affiliate with. Like, you got cool stuff over there and you got cool stuff. And I kind of just want to hear about all the cool stuff. But really, I want to meet you, Tejas, and you, Mark, and you this, because your scars, your path, your experiences, like those are the things that matter. And I don't really do anything small. So I was like, why don't we just make a conference? Why doesn't it just be like this, multiple days, hundreds of speakers? And I don't know, it may have not been the best decision. I would say we kind of started backwards. But, we found a place that was in the middle of all the major metros that are in the upper Midwest. So in the middle of Chicago, in the Twin Cities, in Green Bay, in Madison, in Milwaukee. intentionally placed that if you went and you stayed and you got involved and you met and you got tired and then you left. Not like you went for the day and then you went back home, or you went and you got called out because the boss is like, screw that conference, like I need you here. There was no like, you went, you're there, that's it. And and I just kind of went on from there.
So you mentioned you were speaking. So there were like meetups and things around this time.
Oh yeah, like I spoke.
Oh, wow.
I spoke at meetups. I spoke at user groups. I spoke at other conferences. I was probably speaking at this point. I was working at Microsoft. There wasn't. You know, I was speaking for fun. Not. There was a point where I got to do it as kind of part of the job too. But like, I was just going and talking about the shit that I really liked, and
this is yeah.
And I got involved. And it wasn't, you know, much like TC is today. Like, I would argue that tech is just the thing that brings us together. It's the hallway track and all the other stuff that's the super cool part. Just like at a meetup, like the dinner afterwards, like that's where all the fun stuff comes out. So
yeah. Okay, I am so humbled to hear that, because like a lot of people tell me I speak at a lot of conferences, and this is what some people know me for, and so on. But man, you're the OG speaker. You've been doing this probably before I started my career. I think that's really impressive. You mentioned
just different time, you know, like it's not. I would like to do more of it now, but then I get. You know, I like to be more social on social media, but I got client projects, I got a business, I got contracts, and it just becomes it becomes a time balance that I'm personally struggling with.
Me as well. And maybe we can dive into those struggles for I'm sure we're not the only ones on earth, and so maybe we've learned things that we can share. You mentioned, you know, what you want with a conference, what you wanted with that conference was a place that people can come, get involved, they come with their families, you want to meet their spouse. But you said your path, I want to know about your path and your scars. This is really, I'd say, somewhat novel to me, and I want to applaud it, because I can share with you an experience that I had from the first time I ever went to like a big tech conference. It was JS EU, the largest conference in Europe by far. I mean, it was similar to the size of, you know, that conference as its peak, and they had this massive stage and really great talks. Now on the main stage, this was like 2018. There was a talk about trans rights, I believe, or something like that. So it was about the societal side of tech as opposed to the technical side of tech, which some would argue is more important than the technical side of tech. I think you would, right?
I can tell you without certain, we get more soft skills talks submitted today than we ever have in the past. And if that's an indicator of like where we're thinking, it is about the softer side of tech.
Yeah. And so in the middle of this conference, I was sitting and listening to this talk. And for me, this is like new and valuable information that I never had, because I grew up in a very, conservative culture in Qatar. So like you bring me to Berlin and like, whoa, it's like the world is so much bigger. And so I was fascinated. But there was a person sitting next to me who got up, was angry, left in a huff, and went like, where's the JavaScript in this? It's called JS Conf. Have you faced that with that conference?
Every year.
What's that like? What's that? Maybe you can speak to that. Like how, I mean, you must feel some type of pressure from people to cater to them. Maybe they'll buy tickets or something if we prioritize the robot side of it.
Well, there's always I can make this one really real. There's always the side of like, you can see, I'm trying to phrase this correctly. If you've done any like watching of motivational things online, you'll always see the statement that says, you know, that person's insane, that idea is stupid, it's stupid, it's stupid, it'll never succeed until it succeeds, right? And I always think about like, I'll say the grandfathers in tech trying to, if you build the product that the customer wants, it's 5 years behind, right? You're trying
Yeah.
to build a thing that people don't necessarily know they need, right? Henry Ford was like, everybody wanted a better horse. I built a truck or a car or whatever it was.
Yeah.
So every year, every single conference, I get something that somebody says that they're unhappy about, there's too much of this. And we work really hard to balance the things, what we would say appropriately. And, sometimes it'll be a keynote that is like, oh, that was too fluffy. It wasn't technical enough. We've done like 48 keynotes. Never once has there been anything that's been like, I think the closest technically we got is maybe like design language and like thinking about design in a different aspect of the world that we live in. And so there's always those outliers, right? Like you came at me a few months ago and said, I got some feedback that conference, it felt a little churchy. And
yeah, but this wasn't, just to be clear, this wasn't my feedback. This was feedback from one of the attendees. They came and told me, because they said, let's establish context for the listeners here. There was a friend that I saw at that conference, Texas, who I also saw 6 months ago at that conference, Wisconsin. So it's the second time I see them. But this time they were alone when the last time they were with a friend. And so I said, hey, where's your friend? And then the friend said, oh, I'm not coming because it's too churchy. Okay, yeah, now.
And I hear that. And I'm like, fuck, son of a bitch. Like, and I know you're coming at me in a place of gratitude and like, I want you to understand. And we had a conversation, try to dig into those things. And I sit there and think, where did they get that from? Like, how was that the perception? Like, I don't see it. I mean, I see us as like trying to push you in a place that's uncomfortable to make you a better person. And some of that is soft, like we talked about health, we talked to not being alone, we talked about these things, because that's the shit that I get people coming at me in tears and like needing help and mentoring and all this. Nobody's coming like, how do you do JavaScript closures?
Yeah.
Right? Like, when do we talk about the shit that really matters, right? And we have a balance of like the things that make you human and the things that I would say educate you at scale quickly. Like a conference is about the density of things to get you some semblance of knowledge to understand whether or not that's an area of something that you would like to explore more. And so we balance these things of like, I can go get this really quick. And that can be in a series of like, easy, medium, hard, to like, I'm going to push you as a human to be a better human in your craft that is technology. And so, yeah, every year somebody will say something. Somebody will tell me it's too expensive. There's always some complaint. And unfortunately, those are the ones, they always rise to the top. They always eat at me. I'll overanalyze them. I'll think, what could we have done better? How could we have communicated better? Did we not set the right expectations? Oh, the website's pumping out this damn template that I haven't had a chance to update, right? Like there's this machine. But you knew the schedule, and it's not going to be for everyone. And I have to remember that, and I wrote it this morning, like I've got to do me. And if you don't come, I have to stop taking it as a reflection upon who I am as an individual and what I'm doing, versus something else. And that's been the thing through the pandemic, which I've had a really, really hard time with, is I've associated that we've been doing well with the tickets that have been sold. And if tickets don't get sold, I'm like, people must not want what I'm building, or they don't want me. And that's, I mean, I'm in therapy now because of it. Like it's a huge problem.
Yeah. Yeah, this is not the first time I've heard of this enmeshment. So you're a founder, you're a CEO of that, and the what is it? Undefined,
unspecified.
Is it? Unspecified. This is not the first time I've heard about this, like enmeshment with sort of the person, the identity of the founder and the thing they found. And I appreciate that you're in therapy here, because I know what that's like. I haven't found anything, but there were, even in jobs, right? There's times where you have a feedback meeting and you don't quite get the exceeded expectations or met expectations, but it's more like, we expected more from your performance at work, but you don't hear that performance at work part. You're like, we expected more from you.
Yeah,
You are not
totally
enough. And for the longest time, I've had to wrestle with that in my own journey, where it took me a long time to learn that how people receive me and what I'm about, and how people receive you and your conference, it really says more about them than it does us. And it's their preference. They're allowed to have their preference. And
totally.
That distance was, yeah. So if I asked you to define like that conference, I mean, sure, the tagline is a summer camp for geeks. It's a technology conference, absolutely, but it biases towards the human side, as you've mentioned. In a sentence, how would you like tell that to people? If someone like is going to their office and like, hey, I'm going to that conference, and their coworkers like, what's that about? What's the answer?
Man, I change it all the time. Like I feel like a product manager out there just slinging things to see which one catches. Often I'll say it's a polyglot community conference for engineers and their families. And, the family thing will get a lot of people hung up. The water park thing gets a lot of people hung up. I've likened it to a multi-day, what did I call it? A multi-day event for the Internet of Geeks. I mean, the reality is if you use nomenclature that people understand, it's a multi-day conference for software engineer, for engineers who are in the custom software space, right? And that's an important distinction, because most of the people who are there are builders. They're not Wix slingers. They're not WordPress slingers. Like, we're getting into like, you do React or you do Microsoft. Like, you're building software that is being run at companies. Like, it's mission critical. It's not like somebody gets a phone call when it goes down, right? Like you can laugh at the Friday deployments, right? That's how you know you're at home. You're like, oh, we're going to deploy on Friday? Okay. So
interesting. Well, great. I think that should position people well to understand the conference, and I hope many people come. Honestly, it's easily one of the best, most whenever I come to this conference, I feel like I'm just visiting family, which may work against the conference, right? Because a lot of employers are like, why are you going to this thing? You're just going to hang out with your friends. You're not going to learn things for the job. And
that says a lot about the employer, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Especially right now, like, we're in this place where morale is really bad. Let me back up. We have never been in a place in tech where a thing like a conference or a user group was more needed than ever, and not for the educational reasons, but simply for the human reason. And we now have so many people that work from home who are disassociated with being on a team. And I have people coming to me. We've done 6 now, 2, 4, 6. Yeah. 6 events since 2000. Every single time I have got somebody or some buddies that have come to me and said, I didn't know how much I missed being around humans. Or, holy shit, I feel so alone in my career. Like, we've had people break down into hallways crying because they just didn't realize it. And So we've never needed it more than ever today. And yet getting to people has never been harder than it is today. And I struggle with that balance of like, companies, they try to put an ROI on it. So it's like, how many people, are you going to be able to convince somebody to come work for us? What are you going to learn? Blah, blah, blah. Like it's so regimented. My budget's this. And it's like, do you want to keep these people? Do you want them to like grow in the industry? Like what value do you put on connection? And it's become super transactional, and that's, it's disheartening when you're in the human space, right? Like that's our role. We're in the human space, and you can learn online, right? Look. I tell speakers this all the time, and I'm going to keep go buy Tejas' book. You wrote a thing that somebody can go read. So go read it. But what you don't get is Tejas telling you the things that he could include in here and why. You miss all of that context. And I think so often employers are like, read the thing. You'll be educated so fast. You'll understand how React re-renders. Like it's good. But it won't take but a couple hours after where you've ended up in the shit and you're like, I don't know what to do now. I don't know where to look. Who's my tribe? Who's my tribe of people? Oh, by the way, I work at home. Hey, anybody? Oh yeah, nobody's here. And I can't get on Twitter because Twitter's blocked at my employer. So I'm just going to sit here and I don't know what to do.
Yeah. I'm going to ask ChatGPT. Yeah, I hear you. And it's really sad that AI's our only friend sometimes. I wanted to circle back on what you said, because this is so, look, I know a lot of companies do like wellness budgets. Each employee gets, for example, I'm talking to a company where each employee gets $1,000 per year to spend on health and wellness. And health and wellness includes, you could buy yourself an Apple Watch, because it's a fitness device. You could spend it on a gym membership. I wonder if there's a case
or you could buy Tejas' book.
No. I wonder if there's a case for buying that conference tickets. As like we talk a lot about health, we focus on physical health, right? But as you mentioned, these people end up crying in the hallway, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I've been so alone." Absolutely, that has to have some health effect. So I don't know. I'm just speculating here, and I wonder if you would speak to that. Like I would be comfortable spending a health budget to buy a ticket to a humanistic conference, just to literally just like connect with people. I don't even care if there's technology. How do you feel about that?
So I learned this at Texas. I was asking we've gotten into a place where I'm looking more and more at generational type things. I now feel like grandpa in tech, which is odd. But if you think of somebody who maybe started in 2018 in industry, and maybe they didn't get involved in community, maybe didn't know what a conference really was about. You're just getting your sea legs on you, right? And now it's 2024. You've been in industry like 6 years, 5-6 years.
Yeah.
What I learned in Texas is people don't even know that they could go to their boss and be like, can I just go to this and not take time off? People don't know that usually a company of a decent size, right? And that decent could be just a few hundred people, have budget to send you to go get trained, right? And our conference, while more expensive than it was when it first started, I mean, we're, $1,000, $1,200. You can actually get a ticket for anywhere as low as, $300. Most like that falls well under into what I would call company throwaway money, because it's $1,000. Like their biggest expense is the fact that you're not working. And if they get it, they realize that will pay exponentially over time. Now, having said that, we work in an industry, which I'm going to piss some people off when I say this, but for the most part, everybody is in the top 10% of earners in the world. Like you make good money. And I encourage you to stop asking for everything to be free. Meaning, You need
Yeah.
to contribute to the ecosystem of which is supplying you. And if you want it to exist, there's a cost to that, right? It's human time.
Yeah.
It's like, it takes money to run a conference. It takes hundreds of thousands of dollars. It takes money to build an open source project. But yet your insistency that you should not pay for it and it should be free will only yield you that thing will be gone. So there's this imbalance of like how the ecosystem works. And yeah, people should be asking to go to this thing. And we try to help people justify it, but no, like, you're right. You need to explore these things that make you a better human, to be better in your craft. And it's not just mechanical, right? It's not just how fast you type on a keyboard. It's people get very hung up on, I know how to do a thing, which makes me better than you, so I'm a senior. And none of that shit matters. At the end of the day, what matters is, did you solve a business problem that's yielding money to pay you? Right? Like, software runs regardless of whether you're in a chair. That's the way it was designed. Now, it may not get any better, and there may be exceptions and all that, but like, you can, it still works without you.
Yeah. That's a really good answer. I appreciate you for drawing attention to those characteristics of your conference. Amen. I want to share with you one situation that has some like overlap here. So that conference is people first, tech second, but tech is a part of it. And this reminds me of a conference that I went to. Unfortunately, they're no longer a conference because everybody wanted it to be free, and nobody paid for it. And so they just decided to go out of business, which is really sad because this conference was so special. It's called Agent Conf. I don't know if you've heard of Agent Conf. It's unbelievable, Clark. It's a 4-day event. You've got 2 days of talks in like a theater with speakers and so on. 12 talks, 12 speakers, six per day. And then at the end of the second day, the like formal portion of the conference is over, but for attendees who purchased like a ticket plus, like an extra on their ticket, they get to all be loaded up into a big bus and go up to the mountains to a ski lodge in the middle of the Austrian Alps where it's very snowy, and just go skiing for like 2 days after. And this was usually on the weekend, so like Thursday, Friday is the conference day, Saturday, Sunday is the ski day. And of course, the speakers, just because as a thank you for speaking, they just like take us with everybody for free. And it's nice because honestly, speakers aren't even paid, so that, at least there's that. But this was one of the most special experiences I've ever had, because here's the deal: after the conference, me, Kent Dodds, who's keynoting that conference, Wisconsin, and Rick Hanlon from Meta, like a bunch of us found ourselves in the middle of a ski lodge. It's like a hotel, right? But we're just there, and there's a common space in the basement where you can play ping pong. There's bean bags. It's like the ultimate like youth retreat, and we're just there. And some folks went skiing, some folks didn't, but we're just all in a big house. And there is no plan. It's like you can go skiing if you want, you can go to the sauna if you want, you just do whatever you want. And this was incredible because I would go to the kitchen to get a coffee, and I'd see Kent, and we just start talking about like how Remix does this thing with sending promises over the network, and Ricky would join, and before you know it, we had this like this really beautiful discussion. And then some of the attendees who had paid for the ski tickets also came and joined us, and it ended up being this like organic panel discussion. Clark, this is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen.
You had an open space,
and yeah, that exactly. But the open space, for those listening, an open space is a topic table at that conference where you have a space where you can just drop a topic and talk. We did have that, but it was organic, even less formal. It was nuts. It was so cool, and I wonder if there's something there to pull on, like a thread there to pull on. Like we have a conference with talks, but then there's just a day where we're all camping. Literally, like it's not summer camp for geeks. We don't do anything. We don't talk. It's just you and speakers, you and experts, Just pair program, do something, figure it out. I think this used to be called hacker houses or something. Anyway, does that resonate?
Oh, I love it. And not only do I love it, we're trying to get to it in what you described as something that I in my head call after that. And
nice.
It's going to be a little bit of a journey. You know, if you would have asked me in 2018, we'd be there today. But the world had different plans. We're making strides to change the overall. I haven't really told anybody this, but we're making strides at blowing up what is that conference. I am unsatisfied, or I am. 2017.
Just say it.
2017, we started putting these plans in place, which Texas was a part of it. But it was like, we can't just the next year decide we're going to have a whole new format, because we're like ripping the rug out, right? And so it's like, what were the things that are really important? Well, for me, open spaces has absolutely changed what I think of life. Like that conversation you had, like, I want to be the facilitator of putting a whole bunch of really smart people in the room and shit happens, right? But you can't sell that, right? There has to be something else that the employer wants to pay for. And I say that because 70% of our people, their boss bought their ticket. So you have to define that kind of ROI, and you have to be able to explain it. And you saw us in Texas make that 1 o'clock time slot only open spaces, and it worked.
Yeah.
So we're going to do something similar in Wisconsin, but given the amount of people, we have to have sort of a different format, right? The panel sessions, they worked, but I'm still trying to figure out, how do we get video to people? Like, my upload speed sucks. I got 12 terabytes of data. Like, how do I make this happen? And so I'm all in on it. I mean, we're so in on open spaces. We built that.us to be a place to do open spaces online, so that I could connect. Like, I know you, Tejas, were at the conference, know React, wrote a book, did this, did that, into health. And then somebody's like, hey, I need help with health. And I could go, hey, Tejas, maybe you would be interested in joining this thing, because these people are going to talk about what's a good time to make it all work. Oh, Friday at 2? Cool, right?
Yeah.
Friday at 2 o'clock, we can have this semi-organic kind of conversation that's there. So all to say, I love that format. Like, I think that there's a place where you can be inspired. You can still get kind of the like density of nerd together to kind of bring a commonality of, like, get to learn everybody, and then, like, let's organically do things. And those things could be design reviews, just the conversation like you mentioned. It could be, hey, I'm launching a new product. How do I do this? Like, it can, the plethora of things and people and knowledge that are amassed at a conference are not utilized when we say this is the rigidity of the thing that you should do, because now we've said all these other conversations are invalid, which is the exact reason we have had an open space, right? So to use Ryan Holiday's thing, right? If I say yes to this, I'm saying no to everything else. And it's that white space that I think is really important. But how do you fucking sell that? Like, how do you go, like, white spaces? How do you go, like, if I have kids at a conference, it's a good thing for you and I?
Yeah. Well, I have an idea. It's not very well formed, but what if we call it a hackathon? You know, what if we? It's not just a hackathon. It's a hackathon with, like, specializing in things like React or so. Like, we use words from job descriptions, and we say it's a that hackathon, and then you incentivize the employer to go, like, okay, so you're going to learn those things at the hackathon. Maybe.
I love hackathons. You know, they were a hot thing like 10 years ago, man. You couldn't throw a baseball somewhere without hitting a hackathon. And we used to do a bunch of them, and I think there is something in that, in that white space that you can sell. And we just, I don't want to say we haven't gotten there. Like, we're trying to get out of the place that we're stuck in, such that we can not explore, but if we do it, like, do it well, right? Not just kind of half-ass it.
Yeah. Well, I will say this: everything at that conference is always extremely well done. I've never been to your conference and gone like, "Oh, this is lacking polish here."
I appreciate that.
It's usually, yeah, for sure. You built this so my first exposure to that conference, I went to the website, and I had a unique experience with submitting a proposal for a talk, and then editing my details for the talk. It's beautiful. Like, you have this whole language of, like, you're a camp counselor because it's a summer camp for geeks and so on. That website, I understand that y'all built that. This is not, you're not doing like a Google form, but it's a full system, and it has a database of speakers and all their talks. And I'm curious if we can maybe talk about that. The motivation, like, why, when there's sessionize. Everybody uses sessionize in Google Forms. What was the motivation to build this? Was it to create a cohesive brand? We had Kyle Simpson on the podcast. He talked about creating a cohesive brand out of the You Don't Know JavaScript series. Was it that? Was there more?
I think it's a little of all of it, and I say that because, right now, as the company exists, there are two people, me and my wife, who run it. We have some volunteers who help during the week. Now, we did have another person who was full-time, but due to money constraints, we had to let them go. So how did we get there? Well, back in the day, building your own website was the only thing that could have existed. So we had always built our own, but over time, that to use your words, cohesiveness of brand, but really, like, when you're managing 125 speakers or 150 speakers and 15, 16, 17 different concurrent rooms, but you have a staff of 2, right, or a staff of 5, like during the event, and Tejas is late, or we need to switch rooms, right? Like, how do you effectively communicate that easily, right? And we're software nerds, so we're like, I can make the thing that does the thing that calls the thing that tells all the peoples to do these things, and then everybody knows, and all I had to do is go to one place to go do it. And so...
Wait, so you'll have like a staff coordination system as part of that conference website platform?
So there's been a variety of things that have been built and rebuilt, and there was in 2019, I made a big decision. So I'll come back to that decision because that's a pretty pivotal point. Okay. But to answer your question, I can go into a Google Sheet. I can move you. We basically have this like Git flow, like GitHub kind of workflow. So I have a Google Sheet. I can say clone. It goes to our API. It pulls all the speakers, and I can go in there and I can say, I'm looking for this person or this, and look at it and see it, and it's color-coded times, rooms, open spaces, slots. And I'd be like, look, I got to swap you with this person. The swap happens. I go to my little custom toolbar. I say, publish and send notifications. It goes. It hits our API. The swap happens. The cache gets cleared. The messages go out. The emails go out to the people that need to know, whatnot. Everything's done hunky-dory way, and all I did was go to a Google Sheet. Now, some people would say, why would you use a Google Sheet? You could just write a form and put it on your website and do all this. Remember, party of 2. Behind Google Sheets, there's what? JavaScript. What do tables do really well? They do things like sort and filter and display data. So why wouldn't I just use a Google Sheet to do that? So we have a custom menu that goes and talks to our API and does the things, and we use a spreadsheet for what a spreadsheet does really well. Filtering, sorting, whatnot.
This is so cool.
And I just...
Is the spread...
No.
Sorry to interrupt you. Does the spreadsheet does the spreadsheet get data from your API, or does it also write data to your... So it's two-way bound? It's two-way bound? What? You can do that with Google Sheets? There's an API that would allow that?
You can just call any REST endpoint, any endpoint you want.
Yes, inside Google Sheets? This is the first time I hear
When this is done, I will show you what it looks like. Absolutely.
Oh my
Like
gosh.
everything from speaker selection to the schedule, and we have a lot of other things, but any of those like spreadsheety things, totally. We have our own custom menu that has the things that will, hey, go get the schedule, calls the API, gets the things, populates the spreadsheet. We have a bunch of rules in a spreadsheet to like color code you based upon, maybe your track or whatnot. So we can look visually and say, here are the blocks of time, and then say, oh, there's too many purples in this one. We should really have a purple here and a purple there. Or there's an open, I have an open slot, so that's yellow. And that needs to get filled because we've got 8 slots per thing, and here are the rooms. So this room is open, but I can swap somebody else into that. So we have a little swap function, and I can put in this speaker or this session ID with this one. I could swap it, and then when I've got it kind of like how I want it, I just hit publish. And we have different publish options, like quietly publish with notifications, like whatever kind of our flow is, which calls the API and does the thing. And, our API is kind of our interface to everything. And like, why would I build a admin website to do that shit? Like, I ain't got time for like.
I had no idea. So you don't have a front end. You just Google Docs, Google Sheets, as your front end.
For good pieces of our admin side of things, yeah. Like if I want to go get,
that's wild.
Email communications. So this is kind of touching on like why we have our own platform and our own system. So if I go back, why don't I use Sessionize? Well, Sessionize is their thing. Like it's great. I get like it's cool. I applaud them and everything they're doing. But for us, it takes the like experience, and I'm big on experience, how you interact with us into the things. So if Tejas goes and changes his session description, I want you to go to like log into thatconference.com and make your edit. And when you edit, I want the people that follow you to get the update to do the thing in such that it's done. Like I don't want Tejas calling me and saying, hey, I need to update this because I'm going to go, I don't have fucking time for this. Like you're an adult, you're a human, change it if you need to change it.
Yeah.
And by not being on Sessionize, we're also able to ask questions to force you to not be a clone speaker, meaning I've already done this 10 times. I'm going to hit clone, or submit here, submit there, submit there, submit there. Because we ask you things that are meant to provoke you as a speaker in what you should do where we are. And that information is what we use, whether it's administratively or marketing, like why have a short description? Well, that's the thing that we use to push out on a Twitter and a Facebook and a this and a that. And I need it to be you. And I'm going to have to massage it a little bit because maybe it's a little too long or this or whatnot. But realize I'm going to have to produce, like for Texas, we produced 700-800 social media posts. So that's all of the image generation through like the Serif products. That's ChatGPT. That's our APIs. That's like all of these things that in the end produce a thing and upload to our buckets and URLs and this and that so that we can amass this data out and like schedule it in hopes that, that experience is the best for all. And by us having our own platform, it's a blessing and a curse, right? I have an API of which I can do things, or you could, depending on, who the context of that person is. And we can build an experience that's tailored to what we do, right? And but in 2019 we like rebuilt the platform, and now we have this like giant thing with 2 websites, and there was some marketing fluff in there that kind of didn't work out well. And any kind of founder who like takes a chance and then realizes, well, that idea didn't work out well, so refactor. Pivot.
Back to the drawing board.
And so there's been a bit of that. And we're kind of in a weird spot at the moment where that.us and thatconference.com, it's kind of, it's being worked on as as fast as I can sling features and feed family.
Is it open source? Can others from the community also sling features with you?
Everything's on.
What, really? Wow, cool. So, and I'm assuming there's issue tracking. Like I could go implement my Markdown render if I wanted to. That's so cool. I didn't know that. What's the stack? Is it just TypeScript and?
Come on, you. I'm old school.
What? Is it .NET?
No,
is
the
it
stack
COBOL?
is SvelteKit up front, JavaScript, no TypeScript, Tailwind, because I'm doing everything. The API is GraphQL for the haters out there. It's a federated graph, so we actually have like 6 or 8 different services that participate in a gateway. If you think of an events business, for us, every pillar is one. So like speakers, sessions, events, like each of these like macro level things are their own set of services which get combined at the gateway. We use a suite of third-party services on the side, like Auth0 for security and authentication, and all of our API stuff sits inside of Google Cloud. Each one of the services sit in Cloud Run, so it's kind of semi-serverless container, and the database is Firestore, they've changed the name so many times, but their document store.
Yeah.
And then we have a caching layer with a company called Stellate. So our API.
Oh yeah,
Max
Stroiber.
Been partnered with Max since it was called Graph CDN way back in the day.
Has he keynoted that conf? If not,
he is not. He's actually in our private Slack. How about that? Yeah, we've been using Stellate since before they even launched. So there are our caching layer for the API. 2 sister sites, really that.us and thatconference.com. So we started with that.us with the goal of bringing open spaces online. In 2020, 2021, we were doing an event on the 15th of every month. Essentially, it was, hey, submit a space and we all just get on, and you would go and you'd hit join, and we did everything in the browser. We basically opened up, for those who've used Jitsi or Zoom, we would orchestrate these video calls at scale. And then Jitsi changed their terms of service, and we've kind of refactored, but it became confusing for people. It's like, what's that.us and these open spaces, and I don't really understand. And then it's like, and then there's a conference, so we brought thatconference.com back online. It was like, okay, we're just going to make this thing in person, and that.us will be online. And, there's a bunch of business shit that goes into all that. And the reality is there's 2 of us, right? It's been somewhat of a Herculean effort to get marketing right, but, just kind of get to where we want to be.
Yeah. I think what would be really cool is at the in-person events, at the that conferences, I feel motivated to do an open space that is getting people into open source, and doing so by going to your thatconference.com repo, looking at the issues, and like let's contribute. I had no idea that was
all
open
of it
source.
is,
That's so cool.
and it comes with. It's one of those. It's the place where I struggle the most in open source is. We move pretty fast, and I'm not great at having a backlog that's published that people can contribute to, because the rate of people trying to contribute is so small that I'm like, I could just go get it done.
Yeah.
And so there's a bit of housekeeping that I just haven't been great with it. I've also been burned a few times in the, what are those? What's the October, Hacktoberfest? Yeah.
Hacktoberfest.
There was one year it was like there were so many bullshit PRs. I'm like, I can't do this. Like, I'm glad you changed that one pixel. Like that. Oh fuck. cost me more time to deal with kind of getting that out of the train than anything else. But yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And there are a few people who help pretty consistently on things, and it ebb and flows with people's time. I get it. And it's a big stack.
Yeah.
Like you don't just get to jump in and be like, cool, right? Like there's stuff like we started Svelte in 2019, right? So there's some skeletons in the closet of like, we're trying to get that out. Like, don't copy that. Like, it's bad.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's software, right? It wasn't.
Yeah.
It didn't start today. It started 4 years ago.
Of course. Yeah, and it's going to accrue some tech debt. Awesome. I so love that y'all created your own platform to enable you, as you mentioned, to enable you all to just run the conference the way you want to run it. I also appreciate that you encourage speakers to sort of respect the content they're about to enter, as opposed to sessionize. You can literally just copy it, as you said. I've experienced that, right? I have filled out your forms, and they are long forms. But I appreciate that they're long forms because they make me be intentional about it, as opposed to like, okay, I'm just gonna get this out of the way. So I think they do achieve that.
And it's a watermark of like, if you're unwilling to do this, I understand it. Then your chances of actually participating in what we're building is less. And when we're dealing with, let's see, for Wisconsin this time, I think we had 300 people submit 500-600 sessions. Like, what I don't need is another 300 people who drop a one-liner in about how great it would be to have them. That's just more work for a couple people to filter you out because you are not the right person.
One time, I got almost rejected from a this is some time ago. I had submitted a CFP, and I was about to get rejected. I didn't, to my surprise, and I thought this was interesting, and I asked why. And the guy on the program committee mentioned he had to vouch for me. So the program committee was like, "We don't want him. Look at this abstract. It's one sentence. What are you talking about? This guy hasn't put in any effort." And one of the program committee knew me, and he said, "No, believe me. Like, it's maybe one sentence, but it's going to be a good talk." And he had to coerce them a bit, but then I ended up getting the talk, and then I heard all about it when I got there to the conference. What I'm hearing is a practical takeaway for speakers. To actually care, to put care into the titles, the abstracts, the outlines. And if you don't, you're just not going to get accepted.
Flat out, if
more
you
or less.
submit me a sentence, I'm not even going to pay any attention to it. And I don't mean that to be. I don't care how many people follow you. When you expect me to take you on face value when I've got hundreds of other people who are willing to put in the work, and I'm spending, a few hundred hours trying to figure out who are the 100. Like, why? Yeah. Why am I betting my house on your one sentence? It doesn't feel right.
That's such a good way of putting it. Yeah.
Look, I get a lot of shit for it. I get a lot of shit that it's a long form. Why don't you use session? Why do I got to go here? Why this? Why that? And every time I'm like, well, what about the organizer? Right? Like, none of the things work if it's not attendee, speaker, sponsor, organizer. If all four of those things aren't in balance, none of it exists. Period. It doesn't matter what, or you're a giant corporation where the people who come are the product, and they can say, I don't care about these two because I'm going to sell you this all day. And so often people are kind of bought into like, I'm at the thing, like I'm at the Google thing or the Microsoft thing. It's like, yeah, you're the product. You're literally the product.
Yeah.
You're going to walk out of here. They're going to email the shit out of you and hope to God you tell somebody and buy something, but they're not showing up.
Yeah.
Like, they're paying people to like chase you down and do these things. You're the product.
Yeah. Yeah, that's I think something we all need to hear. What about the organizer? But I feel like these are the people that honestly get taken the most for granted at conferences. You know, my dear friend Jessica West, she organizes a conference called Dinosaur JS. This is another really excellent conference because it's so comical. It's called Dinosaur JS, and I was like, why is it called this? And they literally they go hard. Like there's people in inflatable like dinosaur outfits running around. It's just, and I still don't know why. To be honest, I think it's in Colorado. I don't know. There may be a dinosaur mountain or something, but it's a fascinating conference. And she said this to me in 2019, the before times, the heyday of conferences. Jess West said to me, I said, what's it like organizing such a massive conference like this? And she goes, it's like organizing a wedding, but for many brides. And and I was like,
I could never
wow,
use those
I can't
words,
imagine.
but I would agree.
I could never use those.
It's hard.
Yeah, well,
It's
like
hard.
organizing,
and I think
yeah.
the thing,
Yeah.
like, the thing that makes it incredibly difficult is the finances around things, like, especially now. Like, my costs have almost doubled in the past. Oh, in the past 4 years.
What?
Totally. Like we've gone from, maybe $30 a plate, $40 a plate for food to like 55 to 80.
What, $80 plate of
You
food?
ate
Was
it.
the food made of gold? What, that plate? That plate was $80.
Some of those
Wow.
plates were $65 a plate plus service 25% service fees. Now,
Oh my gosh.
on one side of that, you look at the raw ingredients and you're like, that's crazy. Like, no way. I'm not going to pay that. Well, right. Of course. Like, the price of Jimmy John's has gotten more expensive than the processed meat that they put on it. But what you also don't realize is the chefs that are in back that are trying to prepare food for hundreds of people, the staff that takes to clean up and clean down. And so some of those other humanistic costs are kind of included in some of that. So, there's a whole fleet of people that are trying to make sure that, like in the case of Wisconsin, 900 people or whatever can get fed in an hour's time. But yeah, like everything's more expensive. Shirts are more expensive. Fuel for semi trucks is more expensive. Like everything is more expensive.
Why is that? Is it just because inflation
Yeah,
or
inflation, and I feel like the venues right now have a little bit of catch up of like they're gouging the market a little bit, but you're somewhat stuck playing the game, and it's hard, right? Organizers are stuck with taking all of that risk. And if it doesn't pan out, they pay. Like it's their shit on the line. Like it's coming out. And you don't get to like you commit to how much, like you sign a contract and you owe money right after the ink gets laid down. And you have to fulfill theirs. And every venue is a little bit different. Somebody say, oh, you could use a college and this. Yes. Like all of those things are dependent upon what experience you want to have and how many people, and do you need food and do you need this? And we're at a resort. We're at a legitimate resort. I know it's more expensive, but it also gives us the experience. Like it's intentional, right? There's fire pits and there's a water park and there's this and that. There's a staff that can feed hundreds. There's space. So, it is part of who we are.
I was talking with the organizers of the conference that is no more, Agent Conf, and we were sort of brainstorming because everybody wants this conference to continue. Like the day they announced they're not doing it anymore, people cried because it was so special. So I was talking with the organizers and we were like brainstorming, how can we make this work? And one idea we discussed was, what if we just drop food? Like, what if we just drop food and said, the conference doesn't cover that, but there's a lunch break. You're welcome to go out and get whatever you want. And they considered it and they ran the numbers and it turned out to be way more affordable because of this like $80 plate you mentioned. Would that work?
Because
at that
I have
conference?
food commitments that I have to, like I can't use their place without food.
Ah,
So there's,
I see.
Yeah, I mean, it's
of the
part of how
package
you
deal.
get the space. Let me rephrase. We probably could go concessions based, but then I would be on the hook for paying for this space differently. So we wouldn't be able to do that without changes. Now, I think I'd like to do this for Texas. I need a Kickstarter-like model that allows us to sell tickets before we necessarily sign a contract, right? The problem isn't necessarily that the price of the ticket is such that it is. Like we've done a bunch of research. It's like, it doesn't really matter if the ticket's 800 or 1100. Like the company is already paying for it. So if the few extra hundred helps you be whole, like make it the few hundred, because the company is going to pay regardless. I'm only paying for it if it's going to be sub 300. Well, I can't do that because our food is way more than that. So
Right.
the interesting part is, could you enact a model that allowed you to sell tickets, and if you didn't hit the number, the conference doesn't happen? And then that helps budget some expectations before you sign the contracts that allow you in it. It also helps you understand, what am I dealing with? Am I dealing with 200 people or 2,000 people? Because a lot of people wait till the last minute, and now you're guessing and this and that. So I mean, with anything, if you cut expenses, right, it changes the cost model. If you could sell all your tickets the first day, now you have the rest of the time to plan, right?
That sounds like a really great model. I'm wondering what's standing in the way of that. Is it that the venues need you to commit to a certain date months ahead of time, and that's why this is not feasible?
Typically, depending upon the venue, you would sign multiple years in advance. Oh yeah.
What?
The norm pre-COVID, the norm was you sign a 5 to 10 year contract.
Wow. So you have to go to the Kalahari and say, I'm doing an event in 2025, and it's going to cost me like $100,000, and they expect you to like put 50 down like right now for something that's so far.
What you would end up doing is you would sign a contract. It's incentivized if you sign multiple years. Typically, you don't get a choice if you want to play. Now, again, this is all somewhat venue dependent. And the way it would work would be, let's say we signed a 3-year contract, and maybe as part of the contract in there, it would say you have an 18 or maybe a 25-month rollout or back out. And so you would have to say, you would sign, and let's say the bill, I'm going to use round numbers. Let's say the bill is going to be $1 million for the first year. You would have a rollout. It said, if I quit, I sign right now. If I decide to quit, I owe $800,000 on year 1, and I owe $500,000 on year 2, and I owe 0 on year 3 because you told me in advance of 25 months. And as you get closer to an event, to the day of the event, that number of what you owe if you decided to not do becomes greater to the financial commitment that you've given to them. And so it's gross. Like it's the side of the business that I hate the most. Because you're trying to, we're in it right now. We're trying to figure out contracts. We haven't made the announcement for Texas because I was upside down, and I've got loans out now for this to deal with it. And, we're trying to figure out what's a better time. What does a Kickstarter model look like? What would be the financial commitments that we would have? Same with Wisconsin. We're in the middle of a different set of contracts that, are multiple year type things. And it's
Wow.
It's the ugly side of things.
It must. Yeah, no, I had no idea about any of this, right? So, like, what I thought in my mind was you go to a venue and you say, hi, I want to book it for this date that's 3 months out, and you confirm it, you sign it, that's it. I didn't realize there was, like, such deep and heavy strings attached. Wild. That must feel so, entrapping. Oh my gosh.
You couldn't even, if you were looking for a decent venue, the chances of you getting your time slot are like zero. They're probably booking
goodness.
12 to 15 months out right now. So, there's no way you could, again, it's venue dependent, because somebody would be like, bah, Clark's full of shit. I could get a venue in 3 months. Depending on where you're at, as you need more people, that like shrinks, right? Your availability of venue becomes smaller and smaller, because you're like, oh, well, where am I going to shove 1,000 people? There's not a lot of those places.
Yeah, right.
Or not a lot, like in the like we've had like Major League Baseball stadiums reach out and say, oh, you should do your event here. I'm like, that's, huh? Like like it's wonderful that you thought of me that way. Do I have like 25 session rooms that can hold 100, 150 people? Well, no. Like we would do it on the field. It's like, I don't know. Like, okay, I can't. What do I do after the keynote? Like, then what? So yeah. It's the strings attached.
Wow,
hurts. And we didn't make our numbers for Texas, which meant it's on me, right? Like I paid the bill.
And you have, right, and whether you make your numbers or not doesn't matter, because you're already committed to this venue. One way or another, it's going to happen. So it's really, you pray and hope for the best that people buy tickets, and if they don't.
And in the case of our Texas event,
oh my Lord,
we have not hit our numbers. But I can't quit on it. Like I wouldn't.
What is
it's the events have been fantastic, right? Like that's not your problem. It's my problem.
Yeah.
I didn't sell what I needed to sell. Why? I don't know. But to go all the way back to where we started, that's the kind of shit that starts messing with you. You're like, I didn't sell the tickets, and now I'm out tens of thousands of dollars that I didn't have, and I'm working multiple jobs to make the stuff happen. And I'm not making this like pity me or anything like that. I'm just saying that's the reality. When these things don't align, something suffers, right? And if we go away, not that we're God's gift to anything, but we've been around long enough that we create a bigger void than when we started. And that's a problem, right? No different than when your open source project goes away and you were dependent upon it, but your company was too damn cheap to fork them some money so that they could use the thing. Like, that part's got to get fixed in our industry.
Yeah. Absolutely. What is the role of sponsors in all of this? I mean, sponsors, we could blame so many different things on the state of, y'all not meeting your numbers in Texas. I think the economy is an easy one.
There's a lot of cuts.
Sponsors, I can imagine. How does that work? Do you all reach out to them? Do they reach out to you? I mean, that is a big brand, right? Is it both ways?
It's very much both ways. I try to kind of carve off a good chunk of time every week to cold outreach and nurturing and phone calls. And like later today, I have 2 different sponsor calls. So, it's sales. For a sponsor, it is, they're looking for brand recognition. They're looking to hire people. They're looking to sell a product or a service. There's very much, in some regards, it's almost easier to deal with sponsors in that the exchange is very transactional and known. Like you how do I meet your need as an attendee? I don't even know what your need is. But you as a sponsor, like you've committed thousands of dollars. I'm pretty sure I know what your need is. So like Cloudflare, I knew why Cloudflare was there. I want them to succeed, right? I want them to come back.
Yeah.
And that game has changed immensely over the past 5 years because of the industry and where it's at. So it used to be really easy to sell, you're going to hire people. And now there's such an influx of people, the conversation is a little, and this is true for the conference too. The conversation is a little different. It's not that you don't have people, it's do you have the right people? And do I bring you more of the right people than the influx of resumes that you can't get through? And you could look at the information that you would get at that conference now. You would say, look, I don't need any of this. I can go to TikTok and watch all this stuff on the shitter and be totally good. I can watch all the Tejases and James and Kent, and I don't have to leave my bedroom. But that's not the point. The point is that you're coming to skip the BS and get to the real stuff, right? You don't have to do the searching. We've done the searching for you.
Yeah.
And so, sponsors are hard. They, it's an incredible amount of work. Some of them take many, many years to get. Their budgetary cycles are 12 months out usually. So, I don't know, let's pick, Century. Like if I'm not on their radar, they don't give a shit. Maybe they'll start giving a shit next year, right? That's like, they're not holding on to necessarily excess funds to be like, here, like I'll come in at the last minute, if you will.
Yeah.
But then other places, like all the big ones, Microsoft and Google and Amazon and all those folks who used to participate in a community have all now said, no, we're doing it. And thus all of that money that was invested into community things like us is gone. And that's unfortunate for all of the community events. And that cycle will change, right? They'll go, oh my God, we want to, we're here as part of the community. Yay. Let's be there. And then they'll come back and whatnot. So it's hard. It's sales, it's a constant grind, of, hundreds of people to talk and get on the phone. Last week I was at an office building talking about how they could become a sponsor. Like that was in the grand scheme of things. I missed my consulting hours, gas, time, the hours of conversations ahead of time to the time that I was there. Like that's a big commitment.
Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned constant grind, and I feel like we're painting a picture here of the true reality of organizing, maybe not a conference, but a large conference, an 1,800 people conference. I'm curious what you would say to the aspiring conference organizers out there who are going like, wow, I want to have a huge conference one day. I'm sure there's people listening who are inspired by that. Frankly, I'm inspired by that and by your toughing it out. So what would you say to someone who wants to start something like that?
I would say this. One, you need to get really clear on your why. To say I want to start a conference, like I'm going to tell you that you're going to get into it and it's going to get hard. And if you're not really motivated and you don't know why you're doing it, when it gets hard, it's going to come through the cracks and you're not going to perform well. The other side of that is there's I'll speak from an entrepreneurial place, right? There's it's so fun to do the work, but then on the weekends, right, you're doing the billing, the invoicing, all of that, the biz dev work. And conference planning is much the same, right? The enjoyment is the bracket of days that you get, right? But I spend 365 days a year working on the conference. And that means all the social media, the selling, the sponsors, the crybabies, the great stories, the partnering with folks, the bug fixes, the contracts. And so I don't want to discourage anybody from doing it because we need all of it, and we need all of it regardless of who's around. But I would encourage you to start building your tribe of other organizers, other people. I would encourage you to, maybe there's something that's already there where that person needs help. Like maybe join instead of create new.
Do you have a tribe of other organizers that you work with, or that you have in the past? Huh. Are they conferences that we know that we should maybe also consider attending?
Yes. So I would say they're all in different shapes, like Kent and Epic WebConf. Like, not that him and I necessarily talk about him and what he's doing. I mean, we're going to have that conversation, but we've shared certain things, and I've sent attaboys, and I don't know Kent well. I'm looking to build that relationship with him, so I'm super excited that our paths have crossed. I'm also very fucking inspired by what he's doing. Very. And I don't look at it as like Kent is stealing all the people. I look at it as like our industry got one better because he came back with another thing. And I'm pushed to go do a thing, right?
Yeah.
I know the organizers at a conference called Stir Trek. That's in Columbus.
Oh yeah, I know this one. It's so cool.
Yeah.
It's like Star Trek, but
love Jeff and everybody who's there. Close friends, talk all the time. Just helped a guy in Nashville kick off their conference, and there's like two types of conference organizers. There's the ones who are like, here I am. How can I help you? And there's ones that are like, stay away.
Yeah.
I'm getting all the people. And I'm obviously in the like, however I can help, I'm here. And we've seen this ebb and flow valley of, when the pandemic came, it just annihilated so many user groups and conferences and whatnot. And, it's understandable, but then it's like, it's hard to see as somebody who's involved in the community. Like you're talking about Asian conference. You're like, God damn it. Yeah. Like you go back and you're like, what could how could it have been different? Right. Where was the balance? Yeah. Where was the balance for sure. Mismatch? And it's often financial of like, we worked too hard on the side. My family suffered. I suffered. I didn't have the money, or I had the money, or just enough money. What am I doing? I mean, that's the theme for everybody. Like, holy shit, that's a lot of work. You're like, yep, welcome to the club.
Yeah. I love that you talk about the tribe, because I was just at a conference in Paris, React Paris, and they had in the crowd an organizer of another conference, CityJS, and they often do this. Like they'll have just different organizers come and visit and learn, and they also go to other conferences. Yeah, this tribe thing is super valuable, and I think that's sound for others.
There needs to be more of it
to listen
like,
to. Also,
there needs to be
you
more
mentioned
if you're listening to this and you organize a conference and you want to talk shop, like just find me. Like I would love nothing more than to be part of that.
Yeah, great. And you also mentioned the find your why. That is such a good takeaway, right? Because for me, this podcast is not easy. I mean, it's definitely easier than organizing a conference, absolutely, but it is a considerable time investment in editing and media and all of this. But I'm very clear on the why. And so there's times where I have a discussion scheduled with someone in San Francisco, and that's 11 p.m. at night here. But I will miss the sleep. I will have a big jarring light in my face in the middle of the night because my why is clear, right? And so I resonate with that heavily.
As the old man in tech who has streamed and done a podcast and done these things, and I would say, Tejas, it's great what you're doing. How does it become sustainable? Because if you want it to last and you know your why, it also has to work for you. Otherwise, there's going to be that time where you're like, I can't do this right now because I've got a client project that is overriding it. I've got a wife and a this and a that, and I'm not spending my time correctly. And that time has to include you. Yeah. Right? And your time, your health.
Yeah.
And
For sure.
it's easy.
Yeah.
It's easy to just, you mentioned the stresses of having a contract with the conference. Like, you have a contract with the community who's expecting a thing, and you're like,
Yeah.
then you feel bad if you let them down or you didn't get it. And you need to like step back and
Yes.
say, what do I need to make this happen? Do I need an editor? Do I need a sponsorship? Do I need funds? Can it be a Patreon? Like, the reality is money gives you time for stability. I don't, although I am working
Correct.
in React at the moment, but I don't typically work in React. But I'd have bought your book no matter what, because that I know that it supports you, and it's one, it's an affordable thing that I can easily do, and two, I know that it's going to somebody who really cares, right, and is trying to put good out there.
Yeah, amen. I love what you say about money being a means to stability, because that's exactly it. Like, the podcast has like one sponsor. Actually, that's not true. It has a few sponsors, but I can tell you this: money is not the biggest thing that they contribute. I think ideally how it becomes sustainable is there's enough money from sponsorships that I can then have a small team to do all the stuff, right? It's not there yet. I do literally everything, as you can relate probably with the conference, between you and Carrie. But yeah, hopefully we get there. I'd love to start wrapping up, but I did have one final question for you, which is about that. We've spent so much time on that conference. I've spent so much time at that conference, and I can say this publicly. I pledged it elsewhere. I'll pledge it on the podcast. The Contagious Code podcast, buys one ticket for someone to go to that conference every single time there's a conference. We did this last time. My good friend Andres showed up. It was really good to see him in person, but we do that to support the conference. About that conference, what are some ways people can contribute, get involved, whether attendees, speakers, volunteers? How can people best engage with that conference?
It's funny you asked this, because I literally was just asked the same question maybe an hour before we jumped on by somebody on Twitter. I know this will sound, so often people are like, I would like to like fix bugs on the site. And while that's great, it's not the most helpful for us at the moment. Like, the most helpful for us is things like, how do I tell people at their job or in their Discord about that conference? How do I get introduced to new sponsors who are looking, or the right sponsors who are looking to get involved? Like, we're all of the people, the marketer and the janitor, the developer, the owner. The biggest help I need is just telling people that, hey, there's this thing. Did you know about it? Maybe you would like to go. There's some other places where, we need some video editing help and, that kind of thing. But hell, I can't even get video in a place somebody could download it. Like, yes, I would love a video editor. I have no way to get you it, because it's literally sitting, 12 terabytes are sitting on my desk in, all of these different drives, because took me 3 weeks to just sort them and get them into places that I could start to, move them to something else. So, but the help that I need is like, I need sponsors and I need people who want to be involved in a community conference to, to know about that conference and to tell, and
to tell others
about the
who want
world
to be
today.
involved,
Like, so many people work from home. We've had this bifurcation of like, social media and user groups have died. So, like, how do I tell people? What, do I just yell in Twitter? Do you know that like the majority of our audience isn't even people who are active in social media? So how do I get to them? Right? Do I go to user groups?
That's wild.
Well, we try to.
Yeah.
But if the user group no longer exists, well, then they're gone. So then you go to work.
Yeah.
But what's work? So then I go to your Discord. Which one? Right. Like, it just, and so now it's like, it's all of these places. And I'm not saying that it's bad. I'm just saying, when you ask if I need help, like, that's the place I need help. How do we tell people? How do we get that sponsor to go, I don't need hundreds of sponsors. I need 35. right? Who are those people?
Yeah. And how do we get the sponsor to go right?
Yeah.
And how do we get the sponsor to go?
And I'm not
it's
even asking
worth
you
it.
to sell. You can introduce them to me. I will take it and run with it.
Yeah.
Like all of what we have experienced has been organic growth, meaning you, Tejas, you're like, hey, I think you should. And they're like, oh, I didn't know about it. And then they go look at it, right? Or, hey, did you meet this person at this company?
Yeah.
Oh, look, yeah, no, hey, talk to Clark. Next thing you know, it's that everything happens because of relationships thing. It does, right? And we're a small industry. People play like it's so big. We're very young. It's very small. And the best thing that I could ask is that I think the pandemic did a great job of getting a lot of the toxic shit out. And this is a place where we all get to choose who we want invited to those conversations, right? Who are the right people that should be doing these things, should be supporting, should be this, should be that. And maybe this reset, will yield exponentially over time, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe it's a gift. Yeah. Well, on that note, Clark, I want to stop here and just thank you so much for coming on the podcast, for telling the story of that. You started as just an enthusiast who went to user groups and said, what if there was something in my neck of the woods? And what if there was something that included families and human beings and was human first? And I love that you made that distinction and that you've built the conference to what it was today. And not only that, but you highlight it with these keynotes that are so humanistic. You're looking at after that, and you're sharing all of that with us. On behalf of myself and all of the listeners, I just want to thank you so much for sharing all of this with us, and most importantly, your time. Thank you.
I appreciate it, and I'm not good at taking compliments, as you know. And I want to thank you because, I'm sure anybody who's listening to this already understands, but it cannot go unsaid just how great of a human you are, and how involved that you get. Like, for those who don't realize, like, you and we exchange text messages and things. Like, there's a whole lot of other things that happen that people don't necessarily ever see, right? They see you get on stage and they see you take a mic and do a thing. Yeah. Okay, well, let's back up. You introduced me at that conference. I had zero expectations. I had not thought about it. This was a keynote that came together because somebody backed out at the last minute. But as I'm on stage the day prior, you're texting me while I'm talking saying, can I do this for you? And what an amazing place to be, to where you didn't just come to a conference. You came, but you got involved. And so many people, like, you're there like everybody else. You just also happen to be speaking. And I think that speaks volumes to you being involved in the community, because it's not Tejas has this, it's Tejas is involved and also does these other things. And I think that's very special. I just applaud the work, and I'm here for your success as far as I can be. And I think everybody who's listening spends this time with you on this, is touched in some way. And whether you call me churchy or not, I don't really give a shit. Like, we need good people that put good into the system, because that's how the system gets better. And that takes everybody. That takes the listener, the editor, the podcast person, the interviewee. Like, all of those pieces matter. So thank you for being you, because it's a blessing to not just you being involved, but you gave the gift of you to everybody who was there. Like, you were down there with everybody else. Now, at one point you had sunglasses on, but hey, you're cool. You live in Europe, Berlin. It's cool. We get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, Clark, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for joining my discussion with Clark Sell. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed talking to him. I especially hope you learned a ton about the challenges of organizing a conference, the value of organizing a conference, and if you haven't yet been to that conference, I hope you feel motivated to attend one or even speak at one. I'm more than willing to help you either attend or speak. Just say something on social media and we'll get you into that raffle, or I'll even just like coach you through submitting a proposal if and when their call for proposals is open. And if not at that conference, then to other conferences. I'm more than happy to help first-time speakers get into it. If you're learning from and or enjoying this content, a great way to support the content and the channel at no cost to you really is to subscribe on YouTube and share it on your social media. If you're listening on Apple and or Spotify, then if you leave up to a 5-star review, that would also be super helpful and really just, show me that this is worth continuing. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. Thank you for your interest here, and thank you for your interest in web engineering.